Back with you. It is Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Glad to have you along for the ride and glad to welcome in our first guest this morning. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith joins us back in Washington, D.C. A quick trip home over the 4th of July weekend, the Independence Day weekend, and now back to D.C. to get back to work. Madam Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's a good day here in Washington, D.C.
I certainly appreciate your time. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I guess we start with the one big, beautiful bill. What a week last week was in particular, really the last few weeks, kind of getting to the finish line on this. I guess I'm interested, first of all, in your kind of overarching take. I think most people would admit that this bill is not perfect, but the way government seems to work is perfection is rarely possible on a bill in Washington, D.C., but there's a lot of good in it, specifically for Mississippians. What do you think is good that comes out of the big, beautiful bill?
Well, the number one thing that we talk about so much, Richard, is the taxes. The tax extension for the 2017 tax cuts that were coming to avoid that cliff was so critical. And it was tough getting there. There is no doubt it was tough. This is one that we will always remember looking back. I don't care if you're here one term or 50 terms, staying up 20 hours straight on the Senate floor. We could get up and run to the restroom. We could get up and run to the hall and get something to eat. But 29 hours straight there at your desk with 15-minute votes because we were battling really bad amendments the Democrats were bringing forward. So, it was tough to get there, but, was it so worth it? We just want an America with a great economy. And this is exactly what it's going to do. It's going to energize the American economic growth. That was the goal. We know what we enjoyed in the first term of the Trump administration, and we know what we've endured in the last 4 years. So that's the thing is the tax cuts. The important things like the child tax credit to $2,000. That may seem like a small thing, but when you look at that across this nation, that everybody gets that's pretty significant. I'm proud of the bill that the part of it, the legislative language from one of my issues, Saving America's Workers Benefits Act, and that's just tightening the eligibility requirements for those child tax credits to make sure that illegals aren't getting those benefits. That's a $27 billion savings to this country. So there's so many really good things in it. You're right, it's not the perfect bill, but I'm telling you, there are so many good things in this bill that we can celebrate, from the taxes to the border, tightening up on SNAP benefits that have been so abused. I'm, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about every aspect of it, and we can hone in on any one of the aspects you want to.
There were one of the talking points for Democrats during this was, it's a tax cut for billionaires. They're cutting programs so that they can give tax cut to billionaires. And the thing that was interesting to me about that is there were no new tax cuts that were helping the wealthy. It was an extension of the 2017, and I suppose there's like this big debate about trickle down economics and going back to Reagan policies if you wanted to. But isn't it true that when business does well, the American people generally do well also?
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about people that provide jobs here. And we've always strived to be a country of opportunity. If you can get a level playing field, if you can get reasonable taxes, you can get reasonable interest rates, you can grow and grow and grow. And that's what we're trying to protect here, that why would we punish success? Some of the things, just like the small business deduction, it makes that permanent. That is pretty significant. The research and development to encourage domestic innovation here in this country, that we can bring in new capital investments. whether it's machinery, equipment, anything you can think of, it allows that expansion of that because we're looking at reasonable, basic fundamentals of economics. Whether it's new factories, factory improvements to accelerate the domestic manufacturing that we want to do. We want to capitalize on what we already have here as well as bring in new things. But this permanently renews just like the Opportunity Zone program. I mean, driving $100+ billion of investment to rural and distressed communities. It was worth the 29 hours staying up because nobody was going to give up this fight, I can assure you. But Mississippi has 100 designated opportunity zones. So when you look at all of the details, the minute things that may be insignificant to a lot of people, but to the business world, for the economic engine that we want to make sure we keep finely tuned and running well like a well-oiled machine, these are the things that do that.
Visiting with Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, one of the things that we talk about regularly is, whether this is, you're sitting around your own kitchen table trying to figure things out, or you're talking about the federal government. If you've got a big hole, a debt hole, there are two ways that you can get out of it. You can stop spending and start paying that off, or you can make more money so that you can pay the debt off. It appears to me that this administration, Scott Bessent with the Treasury, they're focused on economic growth to eventually get the national debt under control. Do you believe that it can work that way? Because we know there's increased spending. We know the debt ceiling has been raised once again. But can we economically grow our way out of the debt crisis that we're in as opposed to slowing the spending?
Well, so much of this is just the bottom line is management.
Okay.
And it is how you manage that budget. But I truly think we are headed in that direction. Scott is doing a fantastic job. I briefly knew Scott before he came into this role. And, he's just so smooth. In the hearings, he's so competent. He's so qualified for what he is doing. He just has the ability to bring the vision out. And, our job is to make sure we stick to the plan. And I think that so many people will be holding all of us accountable to stick to the plan, to actually see the needle move. Everybody's concerned about this debt. I mean, buddy, it's amazing to me, even the short period of time that I have been here in Washington, to watch that grow. And it is about spending. It is about management. But to see so many things that I get to see on the reduction, on cutting costs, on making things more feasible that were so just running wild. And, I was talking to Scott Turner, I guess Monday, on the building he's in, and, he's relocating. He is doing something that's going to cut the cost of housing those employees not in half, but almost in half. And to do those things, to be conscious of it, to be intentional of that in every aspect, just like your household when you're sitting around the table. We can't say we're going to save money this week by not eating. Obviously, right. That's not a plan. But to look at what's for agriculture in the bill and production agriculture, it just keeps those investments recommended by the Ag Committee. We got a little criticism of putting farm stuff in the big, beautiful bill. Well, this is how we could get it done. We didn't have to have 60 votes to do this. And, it's a lot of complicated things like the price loss coverage program that I've worked on for years, that the reference pricing for farmers was so out of date, had not been looked at in over a decade, that those small little things that were so tedious to work on that actually was included in there, signed by the president, that it's really going to help so many things overall.
We're visiting with Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. We've got more to get to. She's kind enough to spend a couple of segments with us. We're going to talk a little bit on the other side of the break about the press conference yesterday that was led by Secretary Brooke Rollins over the Department of Agriculture about the foreign farmlands. That's something we talked about before the break. And we'll also talk about DOGE cuts. There was one vote in which the Senate did not sign on for DOGE cuts. Is that over, or is there more to come? We'll get Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's reaction to that as well. Glad to have you along this morning. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. You can join the conversation on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Back with the Senator right after this. It's Mornings with Richard Cross. Continuing our conversation with Mississippi Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. I know there is a lot going on in Washington, D.C., so I very much appreciate your time this morning. Let's jump in. I want to ask you about yesterday, the press conference that happened outside with Secretary Brooke Collins leading the way. You and I have talked in the past about the Farm Bill and the job that Brooke is doing in terms of leading the Department of Agriculture. This focus on security for farmers moving forward yesterday, specifically about land ownership, that was kind of the lead topic for her. What did you make of yesterday's press conference and what this looks like practically going forward?
Well, it just came out yesterday, and, I've looked over the 7 points, but we do have to be so conscious of what's going on around us. When you have something released, such as a noxious fungus that can destroy crops, and people do not look at the farmland, just as you were saying earlier, when you drive by, as national security. But when we're not able to feed ourselves, you bet that is national security. And I think the attempt here is just to take some pretty aggressive action on these critical areas to secure and protect that from the adversaries that may be up to something. And, we just need total transparency there. For so long, we were conscious of foreign ownership like near an airport. If, people releasing buildings at, in an airport there that probably even need to be in this country. But when you look at protecting production agriculture from things that could cause serious harm, I think that we did have to put in some enhanced agricultural safety nets there, because it is so could be so serious. And you hate to really even talk about these things on air because you think, I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but you just think if somebody just tainted the milk supply, if they brought out something that would really destroy crops. And that's the reason I'm so defensive on the products that come to market that we've spent millions of dollars in research and at land-grant universities to get to this point that we can actually grow a crop with, the best ability that we can for the greatest yields. So I'm very, very defensive of those things. And when you would think that somebody would come in intentionally and do something to harm that, I just don't think we can be secure enough there that we always have to be on the lookout for that. But, it does several things from the things that I did read about it yesterday. And we had an appropriations meeting last night. We had votes last night, so I hadn't got to dive into it, in a deep dive. But the things that we're putting out there to protect our nutrition from, things such as frauds in there, but mainly the foreign exploitation.
I'm just having trouble understanding how practically it works when you say, okay, let's just use China as an example, that a Chinese national has bought 10,000 acres in the Mississippi Delta. And you say, well, you can't sell to them going forward. But they've also talked about clawbacks. And I think that's something that Arkansas has already actually done in a few instances. How do you take a sale back from somebody that has already completed a purchase? I don't guess I understand exactly how that works.
And, to me, that is the difficult part there, because you can go too far that you're going to hinder just general commerce, whether
Right.
it's, agricultural land or whatever. And I understand we need to protect the critical infrastructure, but that's a fine rope that you're walking there. And I, of course, plan to have our folks dive into it more on this national security action plan that they've come out with. But, ownership of land is strategic, like I was talking about, airports, military installations. But when you come to farmland, we've got to make sure that there's nothing in there that's unintended that we need to address.
Right.
And I'm sure that it's been thought out, but, we've always taken, the position when somebody comes in and with good intentions, you don't want to have roadblocks for those with good intentions just because they may not be of the origin that where they're from.
Right.
You've got to make sure that this can be something that's doable and workable.
Just a few minutes left with Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. Doge cuts. It was such a huge topic right out of the gate. Elon Musk there and his Doge team and going through and examining where fraud and waste and abuse were. The Senate has had, I guess, a couple of chances to codify some of those. It has not happened yet. It looks like in the next week or so that's going to be back on the docket in the Senate. Do you anticipate being in favor of codifying some of these cuts that are happening that have been recommended by Doge?
Absolutely. I think what most people refer to when they throw that out there, and it's been a lot of chatter on social media, is the Rand Paul amendment.
Right.
He likes to pitch us a hand grenade every once in a while. And with those amendments, there's some really good things in there. But first of all, it would have shut the government down. And you just have to be so careful. And, it looks good on the surface that, the highlighted part of this press release sounds great. How could anybody vote against that? Well, you've got to make sure you get in the details of that, too, of everything that amendment would do. But the good thing is we've got the rescissions package coming up next week, and that's what the meeting was about last night. We are going to build on top of what Doge did. So when I was explaining that is we will have another bite at that apple. That's the plan, that we do want to codify these. I mean, there's no reasonable, sensible person here on the Senate floor with us that's a conservative that wouldn't tell you, oh, yeah, there's great things in there we need to codify, but we need to do it the right way. And that's the things that we have to work through instead of an amendment that comes out of nowhere, really. And you think, boy, it sounds good, but the things in it that are detrimental will make it where you cannot vote for that. But it's not like we're not addressing that somewhere else, because it is critical that we do address that, and that's what we're doing.
Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, there's some people that occasionally we'll talk about the good old days of the Senate when, the decorum was there and you had bipartisan bills that passed and reaching across the aisle and working together. I get that a lot of that is in the rear view. And I know the fight for the big, beautiful bill was at times a nasty one. But did we get a little bit of a glimpse into the way government is supposed to work? Democrats fighting for what they believed in, Senate Republicans fighting for what they believe in, and then you get a bill. I know the Democrats have demonized the big, beautiful bill completely, but did you end up with good legislation? I know it's kind of where we started, where we said it's not perfect, but there is a lot of good in there. Did it work the way it was supposed to work?
It has gotten more difficult, and, I just certainly think social media and things like that have really stoked that fire. And it's amazing the conversations that are held publicly versus the conversations that are held behind closed doors privately. I assure you there's some Democrats that are really glad that this passed.
Really?
Because, they want a secure border. Those are the things that they're concerned about as well. But it is, working now. You can tell when they get their script, when they get their talking points, and when they get their marching orders. And I've been dealing with that on the subcommittee just over the weekend. of, I know this is what you're saying, and I'm watching your mouth move, but I know that that's not what you want, because we would be offering very reasonable offers, and they would just shut down immediately and go into talking points. And I thought, okay, Schumer has sent the email. Schumer has given them what they're supposed to be saying. And as we well know, none of them voted for this. You talk about stick together. You talk about lock, stock. They lockstep. They know how to have a cohesive party. But when we get through the things, we work together at, common ground, you can get there on some things, but it's definitely harder to combat their plan. They have a playbook that they go by. And, the staff and I were talking last night, our committee staff and our analysts, we said it's just so obvious that this is what they were supposed to say. Instead of thinking about their own state, thinking for themselves and making those hard decisions that you have to make. And they love to publicize that. They love to come out saying, oh, this is who I beat up today. And they're just, they're so mad about last week. We're on a high. The president had a huge win on the 4th of July when he signed that bill. I mean, it kind of worked out. And the text that I sent to him was, great shot, all net. And that's what we got. But they're angry. They're going to be very defensive. They're going to be very contentious on things. And we just know what to expect and how to handle that. But it makes negotiations much more difficult to get them off their talking points.
Senator, I thank you so much for your time. I wish you safe travels and look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you for this opportunity. And to all those servers out there, no tax on tips. It's a real thing. So thanks for having me.